On the planet Yautja Prime, a runt predator named Dek is on a training session. He uses a variety of tools to travel the land until he enters a cave, where his scanner tells him that his brother is hiding nearby. Dek attacks behind him with his sword and Kwei blocks it just in time. The brothers begin to fight and Kwei keeps taunting Dek as they move, reminding him to use the cave to his advantage. Swords keep on clashing as they move all over the cave, and after exchanging enough blows Kwei manages to corner Dek but doesn't kill him. When Dek refuses to yield, Kwei cuts the pillar they're standing on and Dek falls into the abyss. He manages to save himself by holding on to the wall. He climbs back up and attacks Kwei again. Later on their ship, Kwei tells Dek it's time to choose a prey so he can earn his place in the Yautja clan. Dek wants to go to Njohrr, also known as the Death Planet, to hunt the unkillable monster Kalisk. Even their father fears it and that's why Dek wants to go after it. He's tired of his dad seeing him as a weakling. Kwei doesn't approve, however Dek makes his vow. At that moment their father Njohrr returns and Dek welcomes his honor with a sample of his blood. Njohrr wonders why Dek is alive, revealing he ordered Kwei to kill him because he's too weak to be part of the clan. However, Kwei thinks Dek deserves a chance to prove himself. An angry Njohrr throws a device that captures Dek and tells Kwei to kill him now, but instead Kwei frees him and activates his laser to send him into the ship. Then Kwei activates his shield to protect his brother since Njohrr opens fire. After closing the ship to keep Dek from escaping, Kwei starts fighting Njohrr and in just a few moves he manages to disarm him. Njohrr activates his camouflage cloak but Kwei keeps punching, so Njohrr stabs his hand before chopping his arm off. Then Njohrr strikes his son down and Kwei starts crawling away, reaching for his arm rather than his sword. Njohrr calls him weak and stabs him, so Kwei uses his last breath to activate the ship so his brother can go to Njohrr. Dek watches Njohrr slit Kwei's neck as the ship's launch knocks him out. Sometime later Dek is awakened by an alarm. The ship has been damaged by the debris in orbit and is hurling towards Njohrr. Dek rushes to the seat and ejects it, so it starts falling at great speed through the Njohrr sky. When a bird almost crashes into him, he activates the shield. He ends up crashing in the jungle and he roars in frustration. Determined to find the monster, Dek takes stock of his weapons to confirm everything is working well. He's startled by a noise nearby and starts searching the area. Suddenly a vine-like creature takes him by surprise and steals one of his weapons. Dek gets his sword ready, but a second vine grabs his arm and he has to cut this one while the first one escapes. Unfortunately, more vines appear and reach for him until they grab his leg to drag him on the ground. Dek manages to take his bow to shoot his captor to force it to drop him, and punches the vine to keep it back. Then Dek runs to retrieve his sword and quickly slashes the vines that keep attacking him. No matter how many he cuts down though, more and more keep coming and they even start attacking together. Dek quickly dodges a few blows and jumps on top of a vine to run on it, which helps him get to the top of a cliff. The vines can't reach him up there and now Dek has a good view of the planet, which looks terrifying. Afterward Dek washes his wound in the river and uses his scanner to find a medicinal plant that can serve as a balm. On a leaf he finds a worm that starts growing red spheres and when he throws it away, it explodes. Then he goes out to explore and search for the Kalisk. On a big field he finds some strange red plants that keep hissing at him, so he moves carefully to avoid them. At that moment Dek hears a voice talking in a strange language and looks up to see Thea trapped in a huge nest. Realizing he can't understand her, Thea changes to the universal translator, which confirms she's an android known as a synthetic. Suddenly a Njohrr vulture appears nearby and grabs a rock to throw at the strange plants. This makes the pods explode with red smoke and shoot their needles, which Dek quickly dodges. Thea explains that the needles can paralyze him so that the vulture can eat him. When Thea offers her help, Dek says that the Yautja hunt alone and Thea guesses he's here for the Kalisk. The vulture throws more rocks and multiple plants are activated, so Dek is hit by the needles. As he starts feeling dizzy Thea asks for a weapon, so he tosses one of his blades at her before collapsing. The vulture flies down and is about to eat him when Thea tackles the beast and brutally kills it with the blade. Dek sees her wave before passing out. Minutes later Dek wakes up because Thea has given him an antidote made from the same flower. Dek stands up and helps Thea do the same, only to notice that she's missing half her body. She explains she's a synthetic sent by the Whale and Yutani Corporation because humans can't live on this planet, but Dek doesn't care and drops her. Thea then points out that many Yautja have come for the Kalisk and none of them survived, but she did. If he takes her with him she'll guide him to the Kalisk's den. That way she gets her legs and he gets his trophy. Dek realizes that it was the Kalisk who destroyed her, but he's still not interested. However, when Thea calls herself a useful tool, Dek doesn't see it as breaking the code anymore and agrees to bring her along. While they travel, Thea never shuts up and keeps asking questions. At the river some peculiar worms begin shooting acid at them, so Dek carries Thea on his back to run faster. Unfortunately he finds the way blocked, and Thea uses the chance to teach him a lesson. She throws a sticky fruit on the ground and the creatures rush to eat it. Now they aren't shooting anymore. Once they leave the river, Dek cuts down a bunch of vines and ties Thea to his back to move more easily. In the evening they stop to camp for the night and Dek uses his device for light. Thea shares that her crew arrived on Njohrr 2 years ago and she was trapped in the vulture's nest for almost 2 weeks. She had hoped that another synthetic named Tessa would come for her, and tells Dek that they have a higher sensitivity than other models. Dek sees sensitivity as a weakness, but Thea thinks it's an advantage to understand other creatures. Thea used to be stuck in the lab, but one day Tessa brought her out to explore. Unfortunately, that was also the day that the Kalisk attacked them. Meanwhile, at the crew's new base, it's revealed that Tessa looks just like Thea. She received severe damage during the Kalisk attack, so now she's in a pod being repaired. Tessa keeps repeating Thea's name and remembering the incident, so the computer reminds her that her priority is to catch the Kalisk. The computer also detects the presence of a Yautja and classifies him as a threat. When Tessa finally wakes up, she's told that Thea was captured by the Yautja. In the morning, Dek goes out to hunt for food. He comes across a bone bison, which is usually Kalisk food. Dek tries to move ahead but has to move back when he discovers that this field is covered in razor grass. When Dek's about to throw his blade, a small creature jumps from a tree and lands next to the duo. Thea can't identify it and Dek roars at it, but the little guy just roars back. Then the creature starts chasing after the bison without issues because its hard skin isn't hurt by the razor grass. Furious about having competition, Dek starts jumping from tree to follow the bison too. The weight breaks a branch and the duo falls, so Dek pierces the tree with his blade and stops the fall right before they touch the dangerous grass. When the bison runs near them, Dek jumps on it and stabs it. However, the bison throws them off by using another tree. The small creature rolls ahead of them and a frustrated Dek tackles it to start a fight, which means Thea often gets smushed. The little guy has surprising strength, but after some struggle, Dek manages to grab it by its neck. At that moment, the bison comes running toward them, so Dek throws his sword and holds the bison's mouth open as the blade proceeds to cut it in half. Dek roars to celebrate a successful hunt, only for a tentacle to suddenly grab his leg and lift him. The duo has been captured by a Luna bug, whose tight tentacle tongue is stopping Dek from activating his devices. When they're about to be eaten, the little creature jumps into the Luna bug's mouth and blocks its teeth with its hard skin, breaking them. The Luna bug is in so much pain that it spits them out and leaves by walking on the razor grass. Desperate for revenge, Dek cuts down a tree to use it as a bridge. The little creature is rolling down the field already and the Luna bug captures it with its tongue, but at that moment Dek lands on its head. He stabs the monster with his sword and makes a large cut that finally kills it. Meanwhile, Tessa and her crew of synthetics are searching for Thea. They find Dek's pod before they're attacked by the vines. The crew quickly opens fire to slow them down, then they activate their flamethrowers to burn all the vines down. In the evening, Dek and Thea make camp again. The little creature is still following them and copying every move of Dek's because it's impressed by how he hunted the bison. Thea names it Bud while Dek shares the roasted meat. Thea asks Dek about his family, so he tells him what happened with his brother and father, but he refuses to accept he's grieving when Thea uses that word. He points out that Tessa counts as her sister, and Thea likes the concept. In the middle of the night, Tessa and her crew find Dek's ship, which crashed after he jumped out. There are many Yautja weapons that Tessa finds interesting, including a grenade that freezes her hand. The next morning, Dek grabs Thea and leaves without Bud, insisting that he hunts alone and Thea doesn't count because she's a tool. Thea tells him about wolves and how they hunt in packs, but the alpha isn't the one who hunts the most, it's the one who protects the pack. Dek misses the point and says he'll be the alpha who kills the most. After finding a Kalisk fang near the river, the duo continues traveling in that direction and reaches Thea's base, which has been completely destroyed by the beast. Among dozens of synthetic bodies, Thea finds her legs. Thankfully, the repair machine still works and she can use it to reconnect both halves of her body, although the process will take a while. She thanks Dek for his help but also apologizes and tells him to leave because she's activated the beacon to call her crew. Thea explains her team is also after the Kalisk, so she can't let him kill it. Dek refuses to leave, saying he'd rather go down with honor than run like a coward. In the middle of the wreckage there's some spilled oil, so Dek sets it on fire to create a smoke cloud. The Kalisk soon appears and throws Dek down, damaging his sword. Dek uses a piece of metal as a shield and slides under the Kalisk to slice its belly, then he throws his small blade at its head and cuts its tail. However, the tail quickly regrows and the wound's close because the Kalisk has regenerative powers, which explains why it's considered unkillable. The monster captures Dek and throws it against the repair machine, which causes Thea's legs to fall off the table. When it grabs him again, Del cuts its tongue to free himself. The fight continues and Dek has to dodge several attacks while Thea tries to retrieve her legs. At that moment she sees a gun on the ground and opens fire at the Kalisk to distract it. Dek uses the chance to throw a chain at the Kalisk's mouth and